Jimin pretended to laugh when asked about love, but Jungkook clasped his hands under the table, making the smile tremble. A trembling smile, a hidden touch beneath the table, and a love denied. Jimin's laugh cracks as Jungkook risks everything to be seen. The glass shattered somewhere behind him, and Jimin laughed, too loudly, too brightly, just as the question about love sliced through the dinner table like a blade. The restaurant was suffocatingly elegant, all crystal chandeliers and white roses drowning in expensive perfume. Cameras flashed beyond the curtained windows, paparazzi silhouettes flickering like restless ghosts. Inside, the table gleamed with untouched wine and carefully curated smiles. Jimin's laughter rang again, hollow this time, a sound that didn't belong to him. "Love," he repeated, tilting his head with practiced charm. "I'm far too busy for that." Across from him, Jungkook didn't laugh. Under the table, where no cameras could see, Jungkook's hand found Jimin's. His fingers were warm, calloused from years of guitar strings and relentless rehearsals. He didn't squeeze, he clasped, firm and steady, as if anchoring Jimin to something real beneath the glittering lie. The smile on Jimin's lips trembled. He kept his gaze fixed on the interviewer, a woman with kind eyes and a predatory microphone. "Fans are my first love," he continued, the words rehearsed, safe, hollow. His pulse thundered in his ears, drowning out the polite chuckles around the table. Jungkook's thumb brushed the inside of his wrist. It was a small gesture, almost nothing, but it unraveled him. Jimin had always been the composed one, the member who turned anxiety into elegance, pain into performance. He knew how to fold his fears into choreography, how to bury longing beneath stage lights. He knew how to survive in a world that demanded perfection and punished truth. What he didn't know was how to keep breathing when Jungkook touched him like that. Because Jungkook didn't touch him often, not where anyone could see, not where the world could interpret softness as scandal. They had built their language from fragments, a shoulder bump in a crowded hallway, a shared pair of earphones on long flights, a lingering glance reflected in studio mirrors. Their affection lived in negative space, in what they didn't dare to say. Jimin withdrew his hand first. He lifted his wine glass, hiding the tremor. The stem clinked softly against his teeth before he remembered to sip. The wine tasted like metal. The interview moved on, drifting to safer topics: upcoming tour, creative inspirations, the pressures of fame. Jimin answered with fluid grace, each word polished. Yet he could feel Jungkook's gaze like a weight against his skin, heavy and unrelenting. Jungkook had always looked at him like that, like Jimin was both a miracle and a wound. Later, when the cameras were gone and the night air wrapped around them like cool silk, they stood beside the black van waiting to take them back to the hotel. The city hummed, neon lights, distant sirens, the murmur of strangers who would never know how fragile their idols really were. Jimin hugged his coat tighter. "You shouldn't have done that." Jungkook leaned against the van, hands in his pockets, eyes shadowed. "Held your hand. You know what I mean." Silence stretched between them, taut as a pulled string. Jungkook exhaled slowly. "You were lying." "I was surviving." Jimin's voice cracked before he could stop it. He looked away, focusing on the reflection of streetlights in a puddle. "There's a difference." Jungkook stepped closer. The space between them vanished, charged with everything unsaid. "And what if I'm tired of surviving?" he asked quietly. "What if I want something real, even if it breaks us?" Jimin's chest tightened. Fear was a familiar companion, fear of headlines, of disappointed fans, of losing the life they had built from sacrifice and sleepless nights. But beneath the fear was something more dangerous: hope. "You don't understand," Jimin whispered. "We are not just people, we are expectations, we are projections. If we crack, everything cracks." Jungkook's expression softened, the stubborn defiance giving way to something achingly gentle. "You're still a person to me." The words landed like a confession. Jimin had spent years being everything to everyone, an artist, a symbol, a dream. But to be simply a person, flawed and afraid and yearning, felt almost unbearable in its tenderness. He laughed again, but this time it was quiet, real, threaded with exhaustion. You always ruin my composure. And you always pretend you have any left, Jungkook replied, a faint smile tugging at his lips. They stood there, suspended between what was safe and what was true. The driver cleared his throat politely from the front seat, a reminder that the world was still waiting, still watching. Jimin looked at Jungkook, really looked. At the faint scar on his chin, the nervous habit of biting the inside of his cheek, the fierce loyalty that had carried them both through years of doubt. Jungkook was not fearless, Jimin knew that. He was simply willing to be afraid for the sake of something honest. Jimin reached out. This time, he didn't hide it under a table. His fingers brushed Jungkook's sleeve, tentative at first, then certain. The contact was fleeting, easily dismissed by anyone who might glance their way, but to them, it was a quiet revolution. We don't have to announce anything, Jimin said softly. We don't have to define it, but we don't have to lie to each other either. Jungkook's eyes searched his, as if memorizing the moment. No more pretending to laugh. Jimin shook his head. No more pretending. The city continued to roar around them, indifferent and immense. Tomorrow there would be schedules, cameras, expectations pressing in from every direction. There would be moments when fear returned, sharp and persuasive. But tonight, there was the simple truth of two hands that no longer needed to hide. And for the first time in a long while, Jimin's smile didn't tremble. The elevator jolted to a stop between floors, the lights flickering once before settling into a dim, amber glow that made the mirrored walls look like warped versions of themselves. Jimin's breath hitched. Please tell me this is a joke. Jungkook pressed the emergency button again, harder this time, as if force alone could summon movement. The panel remained stubbornly dark. It's not a joke. Outside, the hotel's hum continued, muffled footsteps, distant laughter, the faint ding of elevators that were not theirs. Inside, the air felt suddenly too thin, saturated with the faint scent of cologne and lingering stage makeup. Jimin leaned back against the mirrored wall, closing his eyes for a moment. Of all nights, he murmured, of all possible ways to be trapped. Jungkook turned to him, jaw tight. You're thinking about the cameras. I'm thinking about the headlines, Jimin corrected, opening his eyes. Two members disappear after controversial interview, found alone together in a stalled elevator. Speculation explodes. His laugh was brittle. They won't even need facts. They'll write the story for us. Jungkook's reflection multiplied behind him, a dozen versions of the same conflicted expression. Let them write it. Jimin stared at him. You don't mean that. Maybe I do. Jungkook ran a hand through his hair, packing the narrow space. Maybe I'm tired of being edited into something safe. The word safe hung between them like an accusation. Jimin pushed himself off the wall. Safe is the reason we're still here. Safe is why millions of people trust us. Safe is. A cage, Jungkook cut in, his voice sharper than intended. He stopped packing, breathing hard. You think I don't see you shrinking? You think I didn't notice the way your hand went cold under the table? Jimin's chest tightened. Lower your voice. No one can hear us, Jungkook shot back. That's the point. No managers, no cameras, no scripts, just you and me, and you're still pretending. The words landed like a slap. Jimin's eyes flashed. You want honesty? Fine, I'm terrified. His voice trembled, then steadied with force. I am terrified that one wrong move will erase everything we've built, that the people who said we saved them will feel betrayed, that I will become a headline instead of a person. Jungkook's anger faltered, replaced by something raw. You think you're the only one afraid. Silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. Jungkook stepped closer, his voice dropping. I'm afraid every time I look at you and have to pretend it means less than it does. I'm afraid of the day you get so good at pretending that you don't feel it anymore. Jimin swallowed. And if I don't pretend, what then? Jungkook hesitated. The question was a precipice. Then we deal with the consequences, he said finally, together. Hush. Metallic groan echoed through the elevator shaft, making the lights flicker again. The floor shuddered beneath their feet, then stilled. Jimin instinctively grabbed Jungkook's arm, fingers digging into fabric. For a moment, neither of them moved. Jungkook looked down at Jimin's hand gripping him, then up at his face. "You don't have to let go," he said quietly. Jimin's grip tightened instead. "I hate this," Jimin whispered. "Not you, this constant negotiation between truth and survival." Jungkook's free hand hovered uncertainly before settling over Jimin's. Warmth seeped through the layers of fabric, grounding and dangerous all at once. "Then stop negotiating for 1 minute," he said. "Just be here." The elevator's dim light traced the contours of Jimin's face, the faint smudge of eyeliner he hadn't fully removed, the tension etched between his brows, the vulnerability he showed only in unguarded moments like this. "You make it sound simple," Jimin said. "It's not simple," Jungkook admitted. "It's reckless, it's selfish, it might ruin us." His thumb brushed Jimin's knuckles. "But it's real." The word real unraveled something inside Jimin. He had spent years perfecting illusions, effortless charm, tireless energy, unshakable composure. Even his laughter had become a tool, deployed to deflect questions that cut too close. But here, in a stalled elevator with flickering lights and no audience, the performance felt unbearable. "Do you remember trainee days?" Jimin asked suddenly. Jungkook blinked. "At a time like this?" "Answer me." Jungkook's expression softened. "You used to practice until your feet bled," he said. "Then you'd hide the bandages so no one would worry." Jimin smiled faintly. "And you used to wait until everyone slept before sneaking into the studio. You thought no one noticed." "I wasn't sneaky," Jungkook muttered. "You were obvious," Jimin corrected gently. "You just didn't care who saw how hard you worked." Jungkook held his gaze. "I cared if you saw." The confession hung in the air, fragile and electric. Jimin's heart pounded so loudly he was sure Jungkook could hear it. "You were 16, he said, as if that explained everything and nothing. "I'm not 16 now." The space between them felt impossibly small. A sudden crackle from the intercom made them both flinch. A distorted voice filtered through. "We apologize for the inconvenience. Maintenance is on the way. Please remain calm." Jimin let out a shaky breath, his forehead falling briefly against Jungkook's shoulder. "They're coming." Jungkook didn't move. "Do you want them to?" The question was reckless, dangerous, unfair. Jimin lifted his head, eyes searching Jungkook's face as if trying to memorize every line. "We don't get to pause the world," he said softly. "We only get moments." "Then let this be one," Jungkook replied. Outside, the distant whir of machinery signaled approaching help. Inside, time felt suspended, stretched thin by everything they had not said for years. Jimin's fingers loosened slightly, then curled again in Jungkook's sleeve, as if committing the sensation to memory. "If this ruins us," he whispered, "promise you won't regret it." Jungkook's answer was immediate. "I'd regret never trying." The elevator jolted violently, lights flaring bright as the machinery engaged. The spell fractured. Jimin stepped back, hand dropping to his side just as the doors shuddered open to a sliver of fluorescent hallway and the startled faces of hotel staff. "Are you both all right?" someone asked. Jimin's public smile slid into place with practiced ease. "We are fine," he said smoothly. But as he stepped out, he felt Jungkook's knuckles brush his one last time, quick, deliberate, unseen. And the lie in his smile felt heavier than ever. The first scream came from the lobby. It was sharp, startled, and cut clean through the marble grandeur of the hotel like glass shattering across tile. Jimin froze mid-step as flashes erupted beyond the revolving doors, camera shutters firing in a frantic, relentless staccato. "Why are there so many reporters?" he whispered. Jungkook's hand hovered near the small of Jimin's back, not touching, but close enough to guide. "This isn't normal," he muttered. The lobby had transformed into a storm. Microphones thrust forward like weapons, voices overlapping in a chaotic chorus. Jimin, Jungkook, are the rumors true? Were you alone together? Did management stage the interview? Is your relationship more than friendship? The word relationship landed like an explosion. Jimin's chest constricted. He hadn't even known there were rumors. His mind raced. Who saw them? What angle? Which photograph? Which narrative had already been written without their consent? A phone screen was shoved inches from his face. On it, a blurry photo. The elevator doors cracked open, Jungkook's hand unmistakably reaching toward him. Time slowed. Jungkook stepped forward, voice low but firm. Please step back. The reporters surged instead. Jungkook, is that your hand in the photo? Why were you holding him? Fans deserve honesty. Fans deserve honesty. The phrase echoed in Jimin's skull, colliding with years of training that taught him honesty was dangerous when it strayed beyond approved scripts. A security guard pushed through, creating a narrow corridor. This way, please. They moved, bodies tight with tension, cameras flashing like lightning in a relentless storm. Jimin kept his eyes forward, his public smile locked in place, but his fingers trembled at his sides. Inside the van, the door slammed shut, muttering the chaos into a dull roar. The sudden silence rang in Jimin's ears. Neither of them spoke. The van pulled away, city lights streaking across tinted windows like smears of color. Jimin stared at his reflection, perfect hair, flawless skin, a smile that looked increasingly like a stranger's. Say something, Jungkook said quietly. Jimin let out a brittle laugh. What would you like me to say? That our worst fear is trending. Jungkook's jaw tightened. I'm sorry. For what? Jimin snapped, the words sharper than he intended. For touching me, for wanting something real, or for getting caught. Jungkook flinched. The reaction was small, but it struck Jimin harder than any accusation. I didn't think they'd twist it this fast, Jungkook said. I thought we had a little more time. There is never more time, Jimin whispered. There is only before and after. The van turned a corner, the hotel disappearing from view, but the weight in the air remained. Jungkook leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. Do you regret it? Jimin's throat tightened. He thought of the warmth of Jungkook's hand in the elevator, the steady grounding presence beneath the table, the way his name sounded when Jungkook said it like a promise. Yes, he said. The word fell like a stone. Jungkook went still. Jimin squeezed his eyes shut. I regret that the world makes something beautiful feel like a scandal, he continued, voice breaking. I regret that we have to measure every heartbeat against potential backlash. I regret that I can't just, he stopped, the rest lodged behind years of restraint. Jungkook's voice was barely audible. Just what? Just choose you, Jimin said. Silence swallowed the van. Jungkook's breath hitched, the sound raw and unguarded. He turned away, staring out the window, but the reflection betrayed him. Eyes bright, jaw clenched against emotion he refused to let fall. The van slowed in front of their hotel. Security waited. Management waited. Consequences waited. Inside the private conference room upstairs, the air was colder than the winter night outside. Their manager stood at the head of the table, tablet in hand, expression carefully neutral. There's a situation, he began. Jimin almost laughed. The tablet was turned toward them. Headlines scrolled in multiple languages, speculation multiplying by the minute. Hashtags burned across the screen, some supportive, some furious, some cruelly invasive. Jungkook leaned closer, reading in silence. Fans are divided, the manager continued. Some are defending you, others feel deceived. Sponsors are requesting clarification. We need a statement within the hour. Within the hour. Jimin's pulse roared in his ears. What kind of statement? One that reassures the public, the manager said. Clarify that the photo was misinterpreted. Emphasize brotherhood, unity, gratitude, brotherhood. The word felt like a blade. Jungkook's voice was steady, but his hands curled into fists on the table. And if we refuse? The manager's composure faltered just slightly. This is bigger than either of you. The group's future is at stake. Jimin stared at the scrolling headlines. He saw love framed as betrayal, intimacy framed as deception. He saw strangers debating the authenticity of his smile, the morality of his silence, the ownership of his heart. His reflection stared back from the dark screen, perfect, polished, hollow. Say it, Jungkook murmured beside him. Tell them what they want. Jimin turned to him. Do you want me to lie? Jungkook's eyes burned. I want you to survive. The room felt smaller with every breath. Jimin stood abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. I need air. No one stopped him. The hallway was empty, the carpet swallowing the sound of his steps. He pushed open the emergency exit and stepped into the cold night, the door slamming behind him with a hollow echo. The city stretched below, glittering and indifferent. Traffic hummed. Somewhere, someone laughed, blissfully unaware that his world was tilting on its axis. The door creaked open again. Jungkook stepped out, pulling it shut with quiet finality. He didn't approach immediately. He stood a few feet away, as if respecting an invisible boundary. You always run to rooftops, he said softly. Jimin wrapped his arms around himself. It's the only place high enough to feel small. The wind tugged at their coats, carrying the faint scent of rain. They're waiting, Jungkook said. I know. Another silence, heavier than the last. Tell me to let it go, Jungkook said suddenly. Tell me this was a mistake, and I will bury it so deep no one will ever find it. Jimin's heart fractured at the plea in his voice. He turned, meeting Jungkook's eyes. And will you be happy? Jungkook didn't answer. That's what I thought, Jimin whispered. A notification buzzed from Jungkook's phone. He glanced down, then froze. It's trending worldwide now, he said. They're calling it a betrayal of the fans. Jimin let out a hollow breath. We are not allowed to be human. Jungkook stepped closer, closing the distance at last. Then let's be something else, he said. Something honest, even if it's messy, even if it hurts. Jimin searched his face. The fear, the defiance, the fragile hope. The boy who once waited outside practice rooms just to walk him home was still there, buried beneath years of fame and expectation. Footsteps echoed behind the rooftop door. Voices, they had been followed. Jimin's pulse spiked. If we step back in there, he said, everything changes. Jungkook nodded. It already has. The door handle rattled. For one suspended moment, the world narrowed to the space between their hands, hovering inches apart, trembling with the weight of choice. And for the first time, Jimin did not reach for a mask. The rooftop door burst open with a violent clang, and the cold night air fractured under the weight of voices that did not belong to them. Jimin, Jungkook, we need you inside now. It wasn't just management. 2 security personnel stepped out first, scanning the perimeter. Behind them came their manager, face pale, phone pressed to his ear, followed by a senior executive Jimin had only seen during contract renewals and crisis meetings, the kind that decided futures with polite smiles and irreversible signatures. Jimin felt the blood drain from his face. They sent him. Jungkook's voice was low. This is bigger than we thought. The executive ended his call and approached, shoes clicking sharply against concrete. His expression was not angry. It was worse, controlled, measured, already calculating outcomes. You shouldn't be out here, he said. Jimin almost laughed. I needed air. You needed discretion, the executive corrected. His gaze shifted between them, sharp enough to dissect. Do you understand the scale of what's happening? Jungkook crossed his arms. We saw the headlines. You saw the beginning, the man replied. He held up his phone. Sponsors are suspending campaigns. Investors are asking questions. International media is framing this as deception. The narrative is spiraling. Narrative. Jimin hated that word. It meant their lives were stories owned by strangers. We were stuck in an elevator, Jungkook said flatly. That's the truth. The executive's eyes flickered. Truth is irrelevant. Perception is what sustains careers. The wind howled across the rooftop, tugging at Jimin's coat like an impatient hand. He felt suddenly exhausted of performance, of diplomacy, of living inside a version of himself designed for public consumption. What exactly do you want from us? Jimin asked. A joint statement, immediate. The executive's voice was calm, rehearsed. You will clarify that the photograph was misleading. You will emphasize your brotherly bond. You will apologize for any misunderstanding. Apologize. For what? For existing too close to another human being. For the accidental honesty of a moment no one was meant to see. Jungkook let out a sharp, humorless laugh. You want us to apologize for touching. The executive didn't blink. I want you to protect everything you've built. Jimin's chest tightened. Built, as if their lives were a structure that could collapse under the weight of one unapproved gesture. Say it plainly, Jungkook pressed. You want us to lie. The executive's silence was answer enough. Behind them, their manager shifted uneasily. This is temporary damage control, he said. Things will stabilize. They always do. Jimin looked at him. And what part of us stabilizes? No one answered. The city below glittered with indifferent beauty. Somewhere, fans were refreshing feeds, arguing, defending, condemning. Somewhere, strangers were deciding who Jimin was allowed to love. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He ignored it. Jungkook didn't. He pulled his phone out, scanning the screen. His expression darkened. They're digging up old clips, he said quietly. Moments on stage, interviews, every glance, every touch. They're turning our entire history into evidence. Evidence. Jimin felt suddenly exposed, as if every memory had been dragged into a courtroom where he had no defense. The executive's voice cut through the silence, which is why the statement must be clear, decisive, final. Jungkook looked up. Final. Yes, you will set boundaries, no more ambiguous behavior, no more moments that can be misinterpreted. Jimin stared at him. You're asking us to erase ourselves. I'm asking you to survive. The words echoed. Manager, executive, Jungkook, all using the same language of endurance over truth. Jimin turned to Jungkook. If we do this, it doesn't stop here. There will always be another line to draw, another piece of ourselves to trim away. Jungkook's jaw flexed. I know. The rooftop door banged again in the wind, the sound like a countdown. Make your choice, the executive said. Now. Jimin's phone buzzed again. This time he pulled it out. A message from an unknown number. A photo loaded slowly, their elevator, doors half open, but from a different angle. Clearer, closer. Jungkook's hand not just reaching, but unmistakably intertwined with Jimin's fingers. His breath left him. Jungkook saw it. Where did that come from? The executive stepped forward. Show me. Jimin pulled the phone back instinctively. No. The executive's expression hardened. If that image goes public. It already will, Jungkook said. That's how this works. Jimin's pulse roared in his ears. This was no longer about speculation. This was proof. Intimacy, captured and frozen, ready to be consumed. His hands began to shake. Jungkook noticed immediately. He reached out, then stopped himself, fingers hovering in the cold air before curling into a fist at his side. Jimin, he said softly. Jimin looked at him, really looked, at the fear Jungkook tried to hide, the stubborn courage that refused to bend, the silent question in his eyes. Choose. The executive's voice intruded. If you release that image, your careers will not recover, the group will suffer, years of work gone. Jimin's mind flooded with memories, Trainee dorms, blistered feet, shared meals at 2 a.m., stadiums filled with light sticks like constellations. Fans crying, thanking them for saving their lives. Promises made on stage, to be strong, to stay together, to never disappoint. What did disappointment mean? Was it loving someone honestly? Or was it living a lie so convincing it became the only truth anyone ever saw? Jungkook spoke, voice steady despite the storm in his eyes. If the price of staying is pretending we are less than human, maybe the system is broken. Don't be naive, the executive snapped. This is the reality you chose. No, Jungkook said, this is the reality we were molded into. The wind surged, carrying the distant sound of sirens. The world was moving, uncaring, relentless. Jimin looked down at the photo again. Two hands intertwined, no performance, no choreography, just truth. His thumb hovered over the screen. The executive took a step forward. Think carefully. Jimin's voice was barely a whisper. I have done nothing but think carefully my entire life. He looked at Jungkook. Are you ready to lose everything? Jungkook's answer came without hesitation. I'm ready to stop losing myself. The words struck something deep and fragile inside Jimin. For years, he had measured his worth in applause, in chart positions, in the relief of meeting expectations. But in the quiet spaces between performances, he had felt the slow erosion of something essential, truth worn thin by compromise. His phone buzzed again. A notification preview flashed. Breaking, new photo allegedly confirms intimate moment. Too late. The choice had already been made for them. Jimin let out a long, shuddering breath. The fight drained from his shoulders, replaced by a strange, terrifying calm. He stepped closer to Jungkook. This time he didn't stop. Their hands met in the open air, fingers intertwining not in secrecy, but in defiance. The contact was electric, terrifying, and achingly right. Behind them, someone gasped. The executive swore under his breath. Jimin lifted his chin, meeting the man's stunned gaze. We will release a statement, he said, voice steady for the first time that night, but it will be the truth. Jungkook's grip tightened, not possessive, but anchoring. The rooftop seemed to tilt, the city lights blurring as if the world itself had to adjust to this new reality. Far below, cameras flashed again, tiny bursts of light, capturing a moment that could never be undone. And for the first time since the laughter that started it all, Jimin did not pretend. The first thing Jimin noticed was how loud silence could be. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that presses against your eardrums after an explosion, where the world keeps moving but sound refuses to return. That was the silence that followed their joined hands on the rooftop, the silence that stretched between camera flashes and the stunned faces of the people who had built entire careers on controlling their image. Then the noise came back all at once. Are they filming us? Someone whispered. Put the cameras down, the executive snapped, though his voice lacked its earlier authority. A security guard swore under his breath. There are photographers on the adjacent building. Jungkook didn't let go. Jimin could feel the tremor in his own fingers, but Jungkook's grip was steady, grounding. The cold wind bit at their faces, but the warmth between their palms felt almost defiant. This is your final warning, the executive said, his composure fracturing. Release their hands, now, we can still contain this. Jimin tilted his head. Contain what? A human gesture. You are not just humans, the man snapped. You are assets, symbols, responsibilities. Jungkook's eyes hardened. We are not property. The words cracked through the night like thunder. For a moment, no one moved. Then the rooftop door banged open again, and their manager rushed out, breathless, phone clutched in his hand. It's everywhere, he said. The new photo, clear resolution. International outlets picked it up in under 3 minutes. The narrative has shifted. Jimin swallowed. Shifted how? The manager hesitated, then turned the screen toward them. Headlines scrolled in real time. Some were vicious, some were mournful, some were unexpectedly tender. Fans posting old clips of their laughter, their shared glances, their quiet loyalty. Threads arguing that love, whatever form it took, should never be a scandal. Others accusing them of betrayal, of false intimacy, of exploiting devotion. Jimin felt like he was watching his life dissected by strangers who believed they owned the right to judge his heart. Jungkook leaned closer to the screen. "Look," he murmured. A video auto-played, a fan, tearful but smiling, saying, "If they're happy, that's all that matters. They taught us to love ourselves. Why can't we love them the same way?" Jimin's throat tightened. The executive scoffed. "A minority." "Not a minority," the manager said quietly. "The sentiment is more divided than we expected." Divided, the word sounded fragile, like something that could tip in either direction. Jimin looked down at their hands, still joined, still undeniable. He thought of the years spent crafting a perfect image, and the strange, terrifying freedom of watching it fracture in real time. "Let them see," he whispered. Jungkook turned to him. "Are you sure?" "No," Jimin admitted, "but I'm done letting fear make every decision for me." The executive rubbed his temples. "You're being reckless." Jimin met his gaze. "We're being honest." Honesty does not pay penalties when contracts collapse. Jungkook's voice was low and dangerous. Maybe contracts shouldn't demand dishonesty. The tension snapped. "You think the world owes you acceptance?" the executive shot back. "You think love exempts you from consequence? There are cultural realities, market sensitivities." "There are human realities," Jungkook interrupted, "like waking up every day pretending your heart is a liability." The manager stepped between them. "This isn't helping." The city lights flickered in Jimin's vision, not because they were dimming, but because his eyes burned. He hadn't cried in years, not in public, not in private. Tears had always felt like a luxury he couldn't afford. But now, something inside him was breaking open. "I spent so long trying to be perfect," he said, voice unsteady. "Perfect idol, perfect son, perfect symbol. I thought if I was flawless, no one would look close enough to see the parts of me that didn't fit the script." Jungkook's grip tightened. "But perfection is just another cage," Jimin continued, "and I'm so tired of living inside it." No one spoke. The wind roared past, carrying the distant echo of sirens and the hum of a city that would keep spinning no matter what they chose. The manager's phone rang. He answered, listened, his expression shifting from alarm to something like stunned disbelief. "They want a live statement," he said slowly, "not written, live." Jimin blinked. "Now." "In 15 minutes, the manager said. "A major network. They're offering you the chance to speak directly, unedited." The executive's face went pale. "Absolutely not." Jungkook's eyes locked with Jimin's. "Unedited," he repeated. The word felt like oxygen. The executive shook his head. "You will destroy yourselves." Jimin exhaled, long and slow, "Or we'll finally be seen." Sirens grew louder below, news vans arriving, antennas rising like metallic flowers. The world was converging. Jungkook stepped closer, their shoulders brushing. "If we do this," he murmured, "there's no going back." Jimin let out a soft, humorless laugh. "There was no going back the moment I stopped pretending to laugh." For the first time that night, Jungkook smiled, small, fierce, real. The rooftop door opened once more, a staff member calling urgently, "They're ready for you." 15 minutes. 15 minutes to decide whether truth was worth the cost. Jimin looked at the skyline one last time, committing the glittering chaos to memory. The night everything broke, and something truer began. He turned to Jungkook. "Whatever happens," he said, "we face it together." Jungkook didn't hesitate, always. Their hands remained intertwined as they walked toward the door, past stunned executives and ringing phones, toward cameras that would no longer capture a performance, but a confession. And for the first time, the fear in Jimin's chest made room for something else, something fragile, terrifying, and unmistakably alive. The studio lights were blinding. They hit Jimin the moment he stepped onto the set, white, merciless, exposing every tremor, every breath he couldn't quite steady. The air smelled faintly of hot wiring and powdered makeup, a sterile scent that reminded him of every performance stage he had ever stood on, except this time there was no choreography to follow, no lyrics to hide behind. This time, the script was truth. 30 seconds, a producer called. Jimin's pulse pounded so hard he felt it in his throat. Across from him, the host shuffled papers with rehearsed calm, though her eyes flicked up repeatedly, curiosity barely disguised as professionalism. Behind the cameras, silhouettes moved in urgent whispers, technicians, executives, staff who understood that whatever happened in the next hour would ripple far beyond this room. Jungkook stood beside him, close enough that their sleeves brushed. They were no longer holding hands, not here, not yet, but the absence of contact felt louder than any touch. "You can still walk away," Jungkook murmured. Jimin let out a breath that trembled at the edges. "If I walk away now, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering who I might have been if I stayed." Jungkook studied him, eyes dark with something between fear and admiration. "You're shaking." "So are you." Jungkook glanced down at his own hands and gave a faint, humorless smile. "I thought I was better at hiding it." "You were," Jimin said softly, "until it mattered." 10 seconds. The countdown echoed like a heartbeat. Jimin closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, and memories flooded in: trainee dorms, the ache of homesickness, the first time fans chanted his name, the first time he realized that love from millions could still leave one corner of his heart unbearably lonely. He opened his eyes. The red light blinked on. "Good evening," the host began, her voice smooth, measured. "Tonight, we are joined by two global icons at the center of a rapidly unfolding story. Thank you for being here." Jimin inclined his head politely. Jungkook mirrored the gesture. "You've both seen the headlines," she continued. "Photos released earlier appear to show an intimate moment between you. Fans worldwide are asking the same question: what is the truth?" The word truth hung in the air, heavy as gravity. Jimin felt every gaze in the room settle on him, waiting, dissecting, hungry. He swallowed. "For years," he began, voice softer than expected, "I have lived in front of cameras. I have learned how to smile when I am exhausted, how to reassure when I am uncertain, how to appear unbreakable when I feel anything but." He paused, fingers curling slightly against his palm. "Tonight, I don't want to appear unbreakable. I want to be honest." A murmur rippled behind the cameras. The host leaned forward. "Honest about your relationship." Jungkook spoke before Jimin could. "Honest about being human." The words landed like a stone dropped into still water, ripples spreading outward. The host blinked. "Can you clarify what that means for the two of you?" Jimin felt Jungkook's presence beside him like a steady flame. "It means," Jimin said slowly, "that love is not always convenient. It does not always fit the roles people assign to you, and sometimes the hardest part is not feeling it, it's pretending you don't." The silence in the studio was absolute. The host's composure wavered just for a moment. "Are you saying that the photograph was accurate?" Jimin's heart thundered. Jungkook turned slightly toward him, not touching, but close enough that Jimin could feel the warmth radiating from his arm. A silent question, a silent promise. Jimin exhaled, "Yes." The word detonated. Behind the cameras, someone gasped. A producer swore under his breath. Phones lit up across the control room as notifications exploded in real time. The host's eyes widened, professionalism cracking under the weight of the admission. "You understand the impact of this statement." Jungkook's voice was steady. "We understand the impact of silence." The host hesitated, then pressed on. "Many fans feel deeply connected to you. Some feel misled by the idea that your closeness was presented as friendship. Jimin's chest tightened. Our friendship is real, he said. It has always been real, but humans are not one-dimensional. We grow, we change, we discover parts of ourselves we were too afraid to name. A pause. And are you naming it now? She asked. Jimin's lips parted, but no sound came out. Jungkook spoke instead, his voice low but unwavering. We are choosing not to lie. The control room erupted into frantic motion. The host raised a hand to her earpiece, clearly receiving urgent instructions, then lowered it slowly, eyes searching their faces. There will be consequences, she said quietly, the words no longer part of a script. Jimin met her gaze. There already have been. He thought of the years spent compressing himself into acceptability, the quiet grief of denying parts of his own heart. Consequences had never been avoidable, only delayed. The host leaned back, studying them with something like reluctant respect. What would you say to those who feel betrayed? Jungkook answered first. We never promised to be perfect, only to be sincere in our music and our gratitude. Jimin nodded. If our honesty hurts, I am sorry for the pain, but I cannot apologize for being human. The words felt like both a confession and a release. Behind the lights, executives watched in stunned silence, some furious, some calculating, some perhaps quietly moved. The host glanced at her notes, then set them aside entirely. And what would you say to those who feel seen by your honesty? Jimin's vision blurred. He thought of the fan in the video, tearful and smiling. He thought of countless letters describing loneliness, fear, the desperate wish to be accepted as they were. He thought of himself, years ago, staring into a mirror and wondering which parts of him were allowed to exist. I would say, he whispered, voice breaking, that you are not alone. The studio fell silent again, but this time it felt different, not suffocating, but reverent. Jungkook's hand moved. Slowly, deliberately, in full view of the cameras. He reached for Jimin's. Gasps echoed, someone dropped a headset, the red recording light blinked steadily, capturing everything. Jimin's breath caught as their fingers intertwined, not hidden, not ambiguous, but unmistakable. The contact was electric, terrifying, liberating. The host stared, speechless for the first time. Jungkook didn't look at the cameras, he looked at Jimin. No more pretending, he said softly. Jimin felt tears slip free, hot against his cold skin. He didn't wipe them away. No more pretending, he echoed. Outside the studio, the world was already reacting, headlines rewriting themselves, timelines erupting, debates igniting across continents. Contracts would be reconsidered, opportunities would vanish, new doors perhaps would open. Inside the studio, two hands remained clasped beneath unforgiving lights. And for the first time in his life, Jimin's smile did not belong to the world. It belonged to himself. The backlash arrived before the cameras even stopped rolling. Jimin felt it in the vibration of his phone the second the red light dimmed. The studio, which moments ago had felt suspended in a sacred stillness, snapped back into chaos. Producers rushed forward, voices colliding. Someone shouted about ratings, another about sponsors. The host removed her earpiece with trembling hands, staring at them as if she had just witnessed history split open. You understand what you've done, the executive's voice cut through the noise from across the room. Jungkook didn't release Jimin's hand. Yes, he said calmly. The executive's jaw tightened. You've forced the company into a position we cannot defend. Jimin wiped the remaining tears from his face, though his hand was steadier now. We didn't force anything, we told the truth. The truth is not a strategy, the executive snapped. No, Jungkook replied, eyes sharp, it's a risk. Phones kept ringing. Staff members were pale, whispering updates in urgent bursts. They're calling it historic. Stock is dropping. #support is trending #1. It's being banned in certain regions. The contradictions crashed into each other like waves. Jimin finally let go of Jungkook's hand, not out of fear, but because he needed both hands to brace himself against the table. The adrenaline that had carried him through the live broadcast was fading, leaving behind a raw, exposed exhaustion. "Say it," he murmured quietly, almost to himself. "Tell us what happens now." The executive stepped closer, voice low and controlled. Now we assess damage. International endorsements are already being paused. Certain markets will not tolerate this. There will be boycotts, petitions. You may have fractured the group's stability." Jungkook's expression hardened. "The group is stronger than that." "You hope," the executive corrected. Jimin's stomach twisted. The others, their members, their brothers, they had not asked to be dragged into this storm. As if summoned by thought alone, the studio door opened again. One of their members stepped inside, breathless, eyes wide, not with anger, but with something fierce and protective. "You idiots," he said softly. Jimin's heart dropped. "We are sorry." The member shook his head, stepping forward. "Not for that." His gaze flicked between their faces, lingering on the faint redness around Jimin's eyes. "You should have told us sooner." Jungkook blinked. "You're not." Angry, the member huffed out a quiet laugh. "I'm terrified, for you, for all of us, but not angry." The executive looked exasperated. "This is not a group discussion." "It is absolutely a group discussion," the member shot back, a rare steel in his tone. "You built this team on authenticity. Don't act surprised when it shows up." Silence crackled in the air. Jimin felt something inside him crack again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was relief so sharp it hurt. "We didn't want to drag you into it," Jimin said. "You didn't drag us." The member replied. "You trusted us to survive." The executive rubbed his temples. "This is bigger than loyalty speeches. There are contractual clauses, morality provisions." "Morality," Jungkook repeated, incredulous. "Since when is love immoral?" The word love hung heavy in the air. The executive hesitated for half a second too long. That was answer enough. Jimin straightened slowly. "If any part of our contract defines honesty as immorality," he said quietly, "then maybe the contract needs re-examining." Gasps echoed around the room. "You are not in a position to negotiate," the executive warned. Jungkook stepped forward, voice steady but charged. "Maybe we are." The room froze. Jimin turned to him sharply. "Jungkook." But Jungkook didn't look away from the executive. "We have leverage, you know that. The world is watching. If you punish us for telling the truth, that becomes the next headline." The tension was suffocating. The executive's eyes narrowed. "Are you threatening your own company?" "I'm asking it to evolve," Jungkook said. Jimin's heart pounded. This was no longer just about confession, it was about power. The manager stepped in, voice more cautious. "Let's not escalate, emotions are high." "Emotions are always high," Jimin said, surprising himself with the sharpness in his tone. "They just usually belong to fans, not to us." The studio lights dimmed slightly as technicians powered down equipment, but the room felt hotter than ever. Another phone buzzed. The manager answered, listened, then looked up slowly. "International press conference requests are flooding in. Support campaigns are organizing. Some sponsors are reconsidering their pause because of the public response." The executive frowned, reconsidering. "The support is larger than projected." Jimin felt dizzy. Jungkook exhaled softly. "People are not as fragile as you think." "No," the executive muttered. "Markets are." Jimin stepped forward, meeting the executive's gaze fully. "You taught us to connect with people through sincerity. If that sincerity only works when it's convenient, then it was never real." The executive stared at him for a long moment. "You're gambling with everything," he said. Jimin nodded. "I know." "And if this fails?" Jungkook answered without hesitation. "Then at least we failed as ourselves." The words echoed like a verdict. Silence stretched, thick and heavy. Finally, the executive exhaled sharply. We will release a follow-up statement, one that frames this as personal growth, not rebellion. We will monitor market reactions closely. His gaze hardened. But understand this, if instability spreads, consequences will follow. Jimin didn't flinch. We understand. The executive left without another word. The room felt lighter the moment the door shut. Their member stepped closer, lowering his voice. Are you okay? Jimin let out a shaky laugh. Define okay. Jungkook's hand brushed his briefly, not dramatic, not for cameras, just a quiet check-in. You were brave, the member said softly. Jimin shook his head. I was scared. Bravery isn't the absence of fear, Jungkook murmured. For the first time since stepping into the studio, Jimin smiled without trembling. Another member appeared at the doorway, then another. No shouting, no accusations, just complicated, worried, fiercely loyal faces. We saw it live, one of them said. The whole world did. And, Jungkook asked cautiously. The members shrugged. About time. Laughter, real, stunned, disbelieving, broke through the tension. Jimin felt tears threaten again, but this time they were lighter. Outside, the world was still burning with opinion. Debates raged, headlines multiplied. But inside this room, something steadier was taking shape. Not perfection, not safety, but solidarity. Jungkook leaned close, voice low enough that only Jimin could hear. Whatever happens next, we are not alone. Jimin nodded, heart still racing, but no longer suffocating. For years, he had feared that truth would shatter everything. Instead, it was revealing who would stay when the illusion fell away. And as the storm outside intensified, Jimin realized something startling. For the first time, he wasn't afraid of the morning. Morning arrived without mercy. Sunlight cut through the hotel curtains like a blade, too bright, too real, illuminating a world that had changed overnight. Jimin woke before the alarm, his chest tight with the disorienting sensation that something irreversible had happened. For a moment, he lay still, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of traffic far below and the distant murmur of televisions in neighboring rooms. Then his phone vibrated. Once, twice, relentlessly. He didn't have to look to know. When he finally reached for it, the screen lit his face in cold blue. Notifications flooded in faster than he could read them. Support, outrage, analysis, threats, gratitude, speculation. His name trended beside words like courage, scandal, betrayal, liberation. His stomach twisted. A new headline pushed to the top of the screen. Global Response, SPLITS, Idols, Confession Sparks Cultural Reckoning. Jimin dropped the phone onto the bed as if it had burned him. A knock came at the door. He didn't move. Another knock, firmer this time. Jimin, Jungkook's voice called softly, "It's me." Relief and dread collided in Jimin's chest. He crossed the room and opened the door. Jungkook stood there in yesterday's clothes, hair unstyled, eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. He looked younger like this, more vulnerable, more real. Have you slept? Jimin asked. Jungkook huffed a quiet laugh. Not really, you. Jimin shook his head and stepped aside. Jungkook entered, closing the door behind him with a soft click that sounded far too final. For a moment, they simply stood there, facing each other in the quiet morning light. We broke the world, Jungkook said. Jimin let out a breath that was almost a laugh. No, we just stopped pretending it wasn't already cracked. Jungkook's gaze softened. Are you scared? Yes, Jimin admitted, but not in the same way. He walked to the window and pulled the curtain aside. Down below, reporters clustered behind barricades, camera lenses glinting like a field of metallic eyes. Fans had gathered too, some holding signs, some crying, some simply standing in stunned silence. A handmade banner caught his eye. You taught us to love. We choose to love you back. His vision blurred. "They're here," Jungkook said quietly, stepping beside him. "They're always here," Jimin replied. "The difference is now they're seeing us." A loud knock echoed down the hallway outside, raised voices, urgent footsteps. Jungkook tensed. That doesn't sound good. Before Jimin could respond, his phone rang. The caller ID displayed their manager's name. He answered, "Hello." "You need to come downstairs," the manager said, voice strained. "Now, there's a situation." The line went dead. Jungkook met Jimin's eyes. "What kind of situation?" Jimin's pulse quickened, the kind that doesn't wait. They left the room together, moving through hallways that felt too narrow, too exposed. Staff avoided eye contact. Some offered small, supportive nods. Others looked away entirely. The lobby was worse than the night before. The crowd had doubled. Barricades strained under the weight of bodies pressing forward. Chants rose and fell, some supportive, some angry, some indistinguishable in the roar. And at the center of it all, a protest line had formed. Signs cut through the air like accusations. "Protect our values. Idols are role models. We feel BATROID." Jimin's breath caught. Across from them, another group stood firm, voices hoarse but unwavering. "Love is not a scandal. Human first, idol second. We stand with you." The divide was physical, visible, impossible to ignore. "This is what they meant by cultural impact," Jungkook murmured. Jimin felt the weight of every gaze, every expectation, every projection crashing against his ribs. Their manager rushed toward them. "We need to move you through the back exit," he said. "It's escalating." A chant surged from the protest side, louder now. "Apologize, apologize." The word sliced through Jimin's chest. He stopped walking. Jungkook noticed immediately. "Jimin." "They want an apology," Jimin said faintly. "You don't owe them one." "Don't I?" Jimin's voice cracked. "They gave us everything, their time, their trust, their love." "And you gave yours back," Jungkook replied. "That was always the deal." The chants grew louder. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every flicker of emotion. Jimin's hands began to tremble. He remembered being younger, bowing deeply to fans, promising to be someone they could rely on. He had believed that meant perfection. He had believed that meant silence. But silence had nearly erased him. A bottle flew from somewhere in the crowd, shattering against the pavement. Gasps erupted. Security surged forward. Jungkook's hand closed around Jimin's wrist. "We are leaving now." Jimin didn't move. Instead, he stepped forward. The manager grabbed his arm. "What are you doing?" "I can't keep running," Jimin said. Jungkook stared at him. "Jimin, this is not safe." "Neither is living a lie," he replied softly. Before anyone could stop him, Jimin walked toward the barricade. The noise swelled into a deafening roar. Cameras flashed like lightning. Security scrambled to keep a path clear. Jungkook swore under his breath and followed. They stopped just short of the barrier. The protesters were close enough now that Jimin could see the anger in their eyes, the hurt, the confusion. A woman in the front row shouted, voice breaking, "You promised to be someone we could believe in." Jimin's chest ached. "I am," he said, his voice shaking but audible through the sudden hush. "I'm just not the version you imagined." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A man held up a sign, "We trusted you." Jimin swallowed. "I never asked you to trust a fantasy," he said. "Only the music, only the sincerity in it." "Then why hide?" someone shouted. The question struck deep. Jimin closed his eyes for a moment. "Because I was afraid you would stop loving me if you saw all of me." The confession hung in the air, fragile and raw. Silence spread, swallowing the chants. Jungkook stepped beside him, voice steady. "If you feel hurt, we hear you. But love isn't a contract you cancel when reality doesn't match expectation. A supporter's voice rose from the other side. We still love you. Another joined, then another. The sound grew, not unified, not perfect, but real. A messy chorus of grief, loyalty, confusion, and hope. Jimin's knees felt weak with relief and sorrow intertwined. He looked at Jungkook, who met his gaze with quiet certainty. No stage lights. No scripts. No pretending. Just two people standing in the wreckage of illusion, choosing to remain. Security urged them back, the moment too volatile to hold. As they retreated toward the hotel, the chants resumed, but they were different now, less unified, less certain, human. Inside, the doors closed on the noise, leaving behind a ringing quiet. Jimin leaned against the wall, breath unsteady. Did we make it worse? Jungkook shook his head. We made it real. Jimin slid down to sit on the polished floor, exhaustion crashing over him. I don't know if real is enough. Jungkook crouched in front of him, eyes fierce and gentle all at once. It has to be. For a long moment, they stayed there. No cameras, no crowd, just the echo of a world in transition. Outside, the divide remained. But so did the possibility that something new could grow in the space where illusion had finally shattered. The storm that had been building for so long finally broke in a silence so heavy it felt louder than any scream they had ever hurled at each other. The room still smelled of rain and sweat and the bitter trace of words that could never be taken back. No one moved at first. No one dared. Adrian stood by the shattered window, his knuckles bloodied, his breath unsteady, staring at the city lights below as if they might offer absolution. Behind him, Leela wiped her tears with trembling hands, furious at herself for still caring, for still hoping that the man who had just torn her heart open was also the one who once held it so gently. The others lingered in the shadows, witnesses to a war that had never been theirs to fight, but had scarred them all the same. You wanted the truth, Adrian said at last, his voice hoarse, stripped of its usual arrogance. Now you have it. I never betrayed you. I betrayed myself the moment I chose power over us. Leela let out a hollow laugh that broke halfway into a sob. You think that makes it better? You think admitting it now fixes anything? We burned everything we were for a crown that doesn't even fit your head. He turned to face her then, and for the first time there was no defense in his eyes, no manipulation, no carefully constructed mask. Only a man crushed beneath the weight of his own choices. I know, and I would give it all back if I could. Silence again, but this time it was different. Not the silence of rage, but of reckoning, of understanding that some wounds do not close, some bridges do not rebuild, and some loves do not survive the truth. From the hallway came the slow clap of Victor, his smirk brittle, his composure cracking. Beautiful, truly, tragedy suits you both, but while you were busy destroying each other, the world moved on. The council is dissolved. The files are public. Every secret, every crime exposed. The words landed like gunshots. Leela's eyes widened. Adrian staggered back as if struck. You leaked everything, he whispered. Victor's smile faltered, revealing something raw beneath. You taught me that loyalty is a currency. I decided to spend mine on the truth. Chaos should have followed. Sirens, panic, the collapse of everything they had built. Instead, an eerie calm settled over them, as though the fight had finally burned itself out, leaving only ashes and the faint possibility of something new growing from the ruin. Leela walked past Adrian without touching him, without looking back. At the doorway she paused, her voice barely audible. We were extraordinary once. Don't spend the rest of your life pretending we were. Then she was gone. Victor followed, his bravado fading into weary resignation. One by one, the others drifted away, leaving Adrian alone with the broken glass, the open sky, and the echo of what he had lost. He sank to his knees, not in defeat, but in acceptance. The empire was gone, the lies were gone, the woman he loved was gone, and for the first time in his life, there was nothing left to conquer, nothing left to hide behind. Only the long, uncertain work of becoming someone worthy of the truth he had finally chosen. Outside, the storm cleared. The first hint of dawn spread across the horizon, pale and fragile, as if the world itself were daring to begin again.